You're listening to In Sumter with Sarah Jane, a show about celebrating Sumter, a part of the Item Podcast Network, presented by SKF.
Another word for shame, like, I don't know. Guilt, yes. Shame and guilt before.
Yeah, those are different things.
Given me a lot of feedback on that, and I was like, really? And you're like, you didn't know?
Just
We're good to go? Cool. I'm Sarah Jane Gibson, and this is my sister Katie Gibson.
You guys get to listen to me again.
Katie, you're my first repeat guest.
I am your first repeat guest.
You are my favorite person to talk to.
Thanks. I appreciate it.
That's a true statement.
I'm the favorite person that the people of Sumter listen to you talk to.
Guys, vote for Katie. We'll link it up. JK, we have no
I'll run
link.
for mayor. I'm just kidding.
Just watch the video.
Don't
share
take
it.
that seriously, because that's an actual thing that's happening in the world right now.
Yeah, who do you want to see mayor?
I gotta see who's gonna run and all that.
Micah, you want to run for mayor?
I do not.
How come you don't want to run for mayor?
There's too many other things going on right now in my life.
Yeah, that's fair enough.
Mm-hmm.
What you got going on?
Well, my private practice, I'm figuring that out, and just trying to become super proficient at who I am and what I'm doing is a big one. And then we're doing all the
just
work.
life in general.
We're doing all that work with the Enneagram, and so I feel a lot of pressure to be a master of that as well. And so it's just a lot of things to learn right now.
I feel like being the
mayor
master of
not-
something is that's a big thing.
Yeah.
Yeah. I think it also lines up with stuff that you've told me about staying, what's the verbiage that I'm looking for around this? Stay in your lane.
Yeah, being
What's yours?
Yeah, being good at something. There are a lot of people in the world that start doing good things, and they're like, oh, this thing is good, and also this thing is good, and also this thing is good. And so they do all three of those things, but they're all three very different things, and so you can't do all three of them well.
Yeah.
It's like when you pull up, and I talk about a lot of this in therapy with other therapists. You pull up a Psychology Today page, and the therapist has literally anything you could have trouble with listed as their specialty, what they work with. You can't work with all those things well.
It's you start going down the list and you're like, oh, you got that through that? Okay. You're kind of impressive. And then you get to the fifth thing and you're like, this isn't
there's
false.
50, and a lot of that is because its default is just to list everything or what, and some of it is people just trying to market, and therapists are not taught how to market themselves well and all that stuff. But you can't be good at treating everything. You just can't.
Yeah, you can't. Well, you can't. No one person can be good at everything.
No, and so it's that state figure out and become really good at this thing. Yeah. And if there's something else cool that you see needs to be done, maybe you switch tracks, or maybe you point that out to somebody else that you know and say, hey, I found this thing. I think you would be super great at it. You should do that.
You specialize in this.
Yeah.
I think there's plenty in any industry or field.
Mm-hmm.
There's so many people on this planet, and we're all going through very similar things.
Mm-hmm.
Each of us could specialize in something specific, and it'd be okay.
It'd be fine. There's enough for all of us.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and I will say, while I wasn't taught to market well when I was in grad school was really good about saying, you need to be an expert in something. You need to pick the thing that you're going to be good at and you're going to treat, and you just stick to that. And so, that they drove that home pretty hard, and I think people aren't taught that. Pick your thing that you want to, and there's enough for we'll all eat.
We'll
you
all
can be
eat.
an expert in something and still eat. It's fine. You're not going to starve to death because you turn down a client or don't work with somebody that falls outside your purview.
Yeah, it's the difference of being fear-based or being what's the opposite of that? Just coming from a place of plenty.
Strength. Oh yeah.
Yeah, it's very but you make different decisions, and those decisions that are not driven from fear they end up being really good decisions. You just got to get the gumption to do it.
It's hard. It's scary because me with the play therapy practice, I have people that call me and either they want me to see a 15-year-old or a 16-year-old or whatever, turning those people down is scary because that's money walking into my door.
Right.
When I have room for a client, but that's not what I want to do. That's not my focus. And there
That's
are other
super
people
brave.
in this town who work so well with teenagers. I mean, I love teenagers. I work great with teenagers, especially the angrier they are, the better I love them.
Just the angry. That is true.
I love, like, the angrier and more, like, persnickety they are, the more I'm just like, give them to me. I love them.
Love a good bit of sass.
Gosh, I love it so much. You know, that if they're the kid in your class that like all the teachers hate, and like it's like that's the kid I want. I love it. So,
but you don't work with that kid.
No, because there's so many
kid
other people who work really well.
Do you work with? What is your specialty? Like
2.5 to 12.
2.5 to 12.
Mm-hmm.
Which is actually, it's specific, but that's still a wide range. Because you've got all different developmental ages in there.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So 2.5 to 12 is my specialty, and then inside of that, I have further specialty in trauma.
Trauma.
Mm-hmm. All the trauma.
We talk about trauma.
Because trauma is trauma, whether it's sexual assault
or a global pandemic.
Abusive parents.
What do you think about using the word trauma in conjunction with the global pandemic of COVID? Wait 1 second.
For the ambulance
okay, yeah, go ahead.
I'm not, like, I think you can make an argument for it.
Yeah.
But I think, much like this, when we universally experience something, it's still going to be different from person to person. So you're going to have people in this pandemic who are not affected, really. They didn't lose their jobs.
Yep.
Their income is the same. You know, so they're still going to work every day. They're still grocery shopping. They're still spending time with their family because their family, you know, are at home or whatever. Mm-hmm. But for by and large, like, they're fine. Like, they're not really affected a whole lot. And then you're going to have people who are devastated by it, who have lost their jobs or just finally got a job after being unemployed for who knows how long. We got a first paycheck and
then bam.
Yep. You know, got
first
an apartment
one
or whatever, and now
losing it all again. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. So
okay, so when I think I want to talk about a couple different things. I would think it would be one question, but it could be
multiple.
Yeah, because
I'm a gray area person also, so it's really hard to get a straight answer from me if you don't give me a very specific example.
I'm going to give you a really big question, and then you break it up into the 7 that it probably is. How do we respond to trauma, like physiologically?
How do we respond to trauma?
And is that the same or different than having fight or flight or stress or like, I think the general public, you just use broad terms for stress and trauma when it's very specifically different things.
It is not very specifically different things to your body.
Really?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, stress and trauma are the same biological systems.
Okay. So I somebody swerves in front of me in the traffic.
This is a great example.
Stress. Mm-hmm. Okay. I am T-boned, but I walk away fine. Mm-hmm. Same stress. Mm-hmm.
What makes it for like a psychologist, like therapist kind of point of view, what makes it trauma or like a diagnosable PTSD kind of thing is what happens after. So you are going about your day and your boss yells at you, right? God, I might get your phone. I'm just kidding. No one else heard that but us.
Okay, so PTSD versus trauma.
Your boss walks in and yells at you. Like, that is stressful, right? Like, that increases your hormone and cortisol levels. That that makes that little like lizard emotion brain in your head kind of ding off a little bit, and so you're in this hyper state of arousal. Like, you are more aware of what's going on, and you could probably tell. Like, if you guys are watching this, like, you can think of a time when that happened to you, and you're like, yeah, I was like on my P's and Q's, and I was noticing every tiny little thing that I'd messed up, and like because your stress level went up, right? Now, when you go home and like a week later. If you have a good boss, and they don't yell at you every day. If you don't, then we call that like work trauma, but anyway,
we're getting into Alaska.
yeah, so if you go home and like that happened and he was like, great, good job, thank you for like rising to that occasion, we solved that problem, crisis over, like, man, I was stressed out.
Gold star.
You know,
Let's move on.
And you're fine. You don't think about it again. It doesn't occur to you again. Like, that's what we identify as, like, stress, right? It's like the bucket we were talking about earlier. Like, what's easy to scoop out and throw away. If you guys watched the last podcast, we talked about a bucket that you have that you can contain stuff. Trauma
and more
is...
specifically, that means your capacity to handle things.
Yeah. So trauma is, if you, let's say, we'll take work environment again, because everybody connects with this. You have a boss who is terrible, and every day they are on you, and they're yelling at you, and you are the dog they kick, right? When they're frustrated or angry, you can't ever do anything right. When every day, when you go into work, when you go home at night, you're hyper aroused. Like, you're aware of everything going on, you're on edge, you can't ever relax, your body's tense, you have bad dreams. When you go into work, like on your way in, like you're crying, like that's more of a trauma response, because it's this repeated experience of like being pushed into hyperarousal and
so you're like, your body is like preparing to get into that space.
Yeah.
And your body is also like, please don't let's do this.
Yeah. Like, let's run away, please. And you're like, no, I gotta get a paycheck. And so your body never comes down from that hyperarousal. Even when you quit that job and go, let's say you finally find a new job and you leave that boss, and your new boss is great. If your new boss comes in and says, you didn't do this right, you're like
freak out mode.
Like, and now you're worried, like, are they going to fire me? What's this boss? Like, is this the same? Because your brain doesn't recognize, and Bessel van der Kolk talks about this, your brain cannot tell the difference between similar and same. So if something happens that is similar, if you, like, so this one boss is, like, full on yelling at you, right? You get a new job, and this boss is just critiquing your work or, like, correcting you. It's similar, right?
Yeah,
like,
you're still going to be stressed out from what they're saying.
And so your brain is like, similar, same. Like, this is not good. We're not safe. Like, get out, you know. And so you could go into hyperarousal again. And so that's where, like, the difference between stress and trauma comes in. And trauma doesn't have to be chronic. We talked about a chronic situation with work. It doesn't have to be chronic. It can be a one-time incident that happens, but it's what happens after. It's how. So some people experience things that are very traumatizing, whether that's sexual assault, whether that's a car wreck, the sudden death of a loved one, and they have things in their life that help them move through that, and they never have lasting impacts of that. They're fine. They don't go to therapy. Like, they're okay. That is a thing that happens. And then there are people that experience those exact same things, and they have nightmares, and they suddenly have anxiety where they didn't before, and like panic attacks become a thing, and they get nervous, and they have bad dreams, and they're walking down the street, and they hear, you know, a car slam on brakes, and then they get that mental picture run through their head that, like, this thing has happened, you know. So it just, I mean, it really depends. It's literally person to person, which is why it's so hard for me to give, like, an exact
specific
answer
examples,
to a general question, because I'm like, unless you tell me exactly, I can't tell you. Yeah. Because I don't know.
Well, and I've just been so blessed because I have unfettered access to you. And so I'm like, is this response normal?
Yes.
Is it okay for me to be nervous to make right-hand turns all the time?
That's not okay, but it's a normal response to what you experienced.
I was almost hit. There were smokes and screeching brakes. And now it's hard to make right-hand turns. That's a real thing.
That's a real thing. Yeah. I mean, we've talked about that with you, and how, like, you've got a little bit of a trauma response there. Now, it's not
like
your
a
daily
trauma.
life. You're still taking right-hand turns. Like,
I'm doing my thing.
We're still living.
Yeah.
You know, we're slowly working through where that's, like, less difficult for you to do.
You just have to envision yourself making the turn and not being hit, instead of envisioning yourself making the turn and being hit.
That's it, yeah.
And you just keep on going with life. Okay, so do you, you said PTSD and trauma. Every time somebody's experiences a trauma, doesn't mean they have PTSD about something.
Right. So PTSD is not a diagnosable condition until 6 months after the event.
Okay.
So if 6 months later you are still having symptoms, then we can diagnose you with PTSD. But before that, there's something called acute stress response. That's not the exact words. What is it? Because it's got an acronym. But it's an acute stress response. And so if that lasts, that's a really typical kind of normal reaction to like a traumatic, highly stressful event. And it usually resolves itself within 6 months. So people are not normally diagnosed with this. But if you come in and, like, let's say you came and saw me and we talked about this thing that you experienced, and it was 3 weeks ago, and I'm like, okay, cool, I can't diagnose with PTSD, but
watch
we think
that.
we might be heading that way.
Yeah.
So I'll give you this diagnosis in the meantime, and hopefully we'll work it out before that 6 months. But if we don't, it turns into a PTSD diagnosis.
And is there some kind of, like when you have a stroke, you're like, act fast. Yeah, face, arms. You know what I'm saying? Like, you gotta get these, there's like a golden hour to fix this before you get the PTSD. Or it's like, I have this acute thing, can I stop the PTSD from coming? Not to make light of it by laughing, but.
Yeah, no, that's a great question.
If you catch it fast enough, you get
Can
better
it not be a
sooner.
problem?
Yeah, exactly. Because then I just imagine hearing this, and then if I'm like worried about something, be like, oh man, I gotta call somebody immediately. I'm like, my 6 months is almost up.
Yeah, I would say that's a yes and no. What protects us from having long-term traumatic reactions to things are things that make for a healthy person. And so it's good connected friendships. It's people you can be vulnerable with and share your experiences with. It's having ways that you deal with daily stress that work for you. Like, it's those things that help protect us from developing long-term, like, PTSD kind of symptoms and trauma responses. Now, it is very possible that you have, but even that's not always a guarantee, because it's very possible that you have a very supportive, loving family, but still this thing that happened was violating in such a way for you that it just made that impact, and you need more in-depth therapy to process and get through it. And that's okay. That doesn't mean your people aren't good enough. It doesn't mean you're not good enough. It doesn't mean you aren't living your life well enough. It just means you just need a little extra support to help you process it. You can't do it by yourself. And that's all right.
I like what you said about, like, it doesn't mean, like, you don't have a good family or you don't have something.
It doesn't mean you did anything wrong.
It really is just, like, a fluke. Kind of, that's what I'm getting from you right now. It's like, this thing happened and I'm not handling it well.
It's the way your body reacts. So, not to bring a sore subject, but the snake you saw in the yard, Sarah has an extreme phobia to snakes. Extreme. We won't talk about it in depth, so that we don't get like your But like, there's nothing that like you can do in that situation because your body reacted the way it was going to react. And you had no control over how it reacted.
Control.
Yeah.
I wish I could talk about it to make it funny, because I can see from somebody else's perspective that it is funny to watch that.
Humorous. Yeah.
But for me, it was very real and very upsetting.
Yeah. Yeah. And so that's what I think people don't get about trauma responses and stress responses. You're not making a choice to act and be this way. Your body is taking over and saying, this is what we doing.
Yeah.
And that's what's happening. So when we talk about, like, because I know one of the things you want to talk about was the biology of stress and trauma, right?
I wanted to get to that.
So, and I think that's really, really important to understand. And so there's this theory model of the brain called the hand model of the brain. Right?
The what model?
The hand model of the brain. So you take your hand, you tuck your little thumb in, and close your hand over it, right? So you suddenly have a model of your brain. This is what your brain...
Like two of these?
Just one.
Just one?
Right. So like we would split it down the middle if we were going to split it, but we're not splitting
Split
it
like
for
this?
our perfect, So this is... Your brain is fatter than this, right? So it's like, it sticks out a little more up front.
Where's my prefrontal cortex?
Right here.
Okay.
In the front.
Okay.
Like, did you remember that?
You're like, where's my forehead?
So this is the hand model.
Here.
This is the hand model of the brain, right?
Okay.
And so this is your spinal cord. This is your this is like your lizard brain kind of space. This is what develops first in your mom's tummy. This is where your heart rate is regulated here, your breathing is regulated here. There's space in here that tells you, like, I'm sitting up, I'm laying down, I'm standing, I'm hot, I'm cold. Like, all of that happens down here.
Okay. Okay, keep talking.
This is also the space that like gives you an indication of like where you are in time and space, right? So down here. Up here in this whole top, so after that develops, this little guy in here develops, right? So this is where your amygdala and all that is. This is all of your feeling stuff, right? So this is where your fight, flight, freeze response is. So this develops next. And this is where, so this is where all your feelings are, right?
Okay.
So we close it back over. This is where all your logical processing is, right? This is where your language is. This is where your prefrontal cortex is that you talked about, and that's where you make choices, right? Which this isn't fully developed till you're 25.
Choices.
So parents, if you have kids that are like, why are they doing this? They don't know. This isn't developed. They're just like living on a wing and a prayer.
Choices.
So that's all this up here, right?
Okay.
And what I think is one of the most fascinating things I ever learned is there is nothing that directly ties this knowledge language system that's up here in the top of your brain to this part of your brain.
Nothing that ties language to like your heart and feelings?
Yes, nothing. There's no direct connection between these two. Okay? So
weird.
But
you would think that is not.
That is very important, right?
Yes.
What I do think is really interesting is your sense of smell is like how is like right down in here.
Oh, okay. So let's talk about smell and
that's just like anecdotal. Like your sense of smell is just like tucked down
but I
in
don't
there.
think everybody knows that smell is what is it?
Most closely related to memory.
Most closely related to memory. So like. If you smell something, you're like, oh my gosh, I'm in 5th grade.
And a lot of times
Avril
what happens
Lavigne is playing in the background.
Well, a lot of times what happens is you smell that thing, and then all of a sudden you have like this rush of emotion.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's because it's touched.
I get real angsty. It's like Dove, cucumber, melon, and I'm just real angsty.
So that like your sense of smell is like tucked right in there, right?
Okay,
and sometimes you have that, and you have that rush of feeling, and you don't have any way to like describe. Like, I don't know what this is, but I suddenly feel this way, and it's familiar, and maybe it's comfortable, or it's distressing, but I don't know, I don't have any language to, like, put to it. Like, I just feel that way. So, alright, so this is your hand, this is your brain, right? So let's take you and the snake the other day, right? Don't dig in, just you and the snake the other day.
Just me and the snake.
You're walking across the backyard. You see the snake, right? You stop, and then immediately, like, you start thinking, right, up here. Well, then you got this phobia down in here, and this piece down in here says, shut the fuck up, you're not reacting quick enough to this thing, so we're going to
freak out, which is what my brain felt like.
So it turns off the logic part of your brain, so you're no longer able to use your prefrontal cortex and make choices. It turns this off, and you're just reacting.
I feel reactive right now.
So that is what happens when you come into like highly stressful traumatic, like you don't get to make choices anymore. Your body literally takes that away from you because what it's telling you is like, you're gonna die. Mm-hmm. We're not gonna survive this. We have to act faster.
That's how it felt.
You don't have time. And the processing of all that is like 0.01 seconds faster. But your brain is like, this matters.
Like, and y'all, you know, you guys are in the pool. That is how quickly that happened because I started to put my foot down and I saw, but when I remember, I just saw a blurry line. My vision went blurry. I felt like I was going to faint and tip back. I picked my foot back up before I ever put it back down. Like, that's how, and I just started running and screaming. And so, which is funny to think about now because I was running toward nowhere. It's hugely present. But anyway, when you think about that as when you say, like, you had no
choice.
I had no control over that. Because people are, are you okay? I'm like, no. I'm not okay, and I can't fix it because I know how stupid that looked. That is...
Now you're getting upset because your logic brain's coming back on and you're thinking about what I just did.
It's illogical for me to have responded that way and not be able to stop hyperventilating and not be able to not throw up because I got so stressed out. Like, that's stupid.
It's not stupid.
I'm embarrassed by it. I think it's ridiculous.
It's not, though. That's what happens.
So all this went away, and then all this freak out happened, and then the logic came back in. But when you take that over, like, I think having an irrational phobia, which is what it is,
Yeah.
but applying to, like, a car screeching, your boss yelling at you, all this other stuff, you're telling me my body responds the same because it's all stress.
Yes. Now, those things, it's going to be different levels, so it's not going to turn your logic brain off every time, but your response is going to be much more gut and much more feelings based than it is going to be logic choice based.
Yeah.
And so
I think just it's a lot to take in and comprehend that,
because now you're applying it to other places in your life.
Because you apply
like,
it,
oh my god.
Yeah, you apply it to other stuff, and you're like, wait, because I have this, if I get, so let's say you're in a stressed state for a prolonged period of time.
Yeah.
Like you have to work from home and you're really afraid to leave.
Yeah, because you might die.
Because you might die. That's maybe not trauma stress. It could be, but it might not be. But if it's not trauma, and this is just for the specific word, trauma, because we're talking about it specifically. If it's not, then how does your body start to behave when you're in prolonged stress?
Yeah, that's a good question. So I think when we sat down and we were just talking about this, and I think it's the easiest way to talk about it is we sat down to do the podcast, and I was like, why am I here again? Like, what are we doing? Like, I just kind of felt a little bit in a daze. Like, I don't really feel good. I'm tired. Like, it's been a long weekend. And so my eyes are watering. I'm not crying. So
Prolonged stress.
Yeah, so I was sitting here and I noticed, like, my shoulders were, like, creeping up. Like, I was holding my body up a little harder and a little higher, right? And that's the stress response. And so I was like, oh, this is happening. I need to, like, take a breath and, like, let my shoulders go, And so it's just paying attention. Your body is going to start responding by tensing up a little bit. So a while ago, I was noticing that I was carrying a lot of stress on my shoulders. And so I pay a lot of attention to my shoulders. So if they creep up at all, I'm like, stop it. Stop it. So since I've, like, gotten on my body about that, now I've noticed, instead of carrying
we're going to come at a different way.
I started gritting my teeth.
Okay.
Right? And so I can feel it. It's the jaws, and it just gets tight in the back of my jaws now instead. And so I'll just be hanging out somewhere, and I'll notice, like, the front of my teeth are touching, and there's, like, pressure there, and I'm like, I'm watching television in my home.
Yes.
What's wrong with me? Right? And again, I just gotta take a deep breath. Maybe I could do some yoga. Maybe I do a spin class. Maybe I just walk outside and go lay in the sunshine. But it's just noticing your body is gonna start hoarding these feelings, right? It's gonna be paying attention to what's happening in that amygdala part of your brain, and it's gonna start responding, right? Amygdala's right here. Amygdala's in here.
Okay.
There's a whole bunch of stuff in here, but your amygdala is, like, a big one. Okay. It's the part of your brain that, like, makes the choice. Like, are we going to let you think through this, or are we going to, like, just respond?
Oh, I'm glad that you said that, because I didn't know.
Because there's a part of your brain that decides, like, which one of these are we going to do.
So you don't really get to decide. That little tiny thing in the very middle gets to decide, I'm going to let you hold on to this one thing through. Like, I'm going to take over and we're going to survive.
Right.
Okay.
Yeah. So, sorry. So that is, that's your, Bessel van der Kolk he's got a book out called The Body Keeps the Score. If you do have a trauma history that affects you on a daily basis, I would strongly caution you around reading this book without having a professional to talk to in the process about it, because it is so real and accurate. He shares other people's traumatic stories. Not really in depth, but he does share other people's traumatic stories. And so it can just be really triggering if you have a trauma that's happening for you and you're very highly symptomatic is what I call it. So you're having a lot of symptoms going on. I would just be very cautious in reading that. And maybe you start reading it, and if you start reading it and you're like, ooh, this is a lot, a therapist to talk to about it, like, and process it with. But Bessel van der Kolk is very famous for saying, your body keeps its score. It's the name of the book. Like, your body remembers. It remembers. Your mind may forget. You may push it and shove it way down, but your body is going to hold on to that. And you don't get to choose.
That is disappointing.
It's hard, right? And I know, like, part of that can sound really hopeless. It's not. You can work it out, but you have to be intentional about working it out.
Well, and you have to. I love Harry Potter. So it talks about the villain in the book, Voldemort, is splitting his soul into all these Horcruxes so that he can live forever. And so he's splitting his soul all apart. And it's like, how do you ever come back from that? And Hermione's explaining that you can come back from it, but the pain of working through it could kill you because you have to experience real remorse. And so it's vulnerable. Yeah, and you have to be vulnerable. And that's the hard part of, like, taking your time, being easy with yourself, and, like, working through all this. It's going to take a lot longer, but it's like you said, it's not hopeless.
Yeah.
I don't think. Anyway.
Yeah, no. Also, Micah, remind me to tell you to, like, put, like, a trauma warning on this.
Trauma warning. But yeah.
So,
those things do take a long time to work out.
They do. And so I know you had Melissa on last week, and you guys talked about that craniosacral therapy. I talked to you a lot about a podcast I listened to recently called Enneagram Mapmakers.
With Chris Hewarts.
With Chris Hewarts. He also had a lady on that does craniosacral therapy, and she talks about, like, people come in and they lay on my table, and it's, the easiest way to describe it is massage therapy and talk therapy like had a baby. So you are fully, like, clothed, but you are on a massage table, and you've got a therapist in there. It's a very massage like environment. So the lights are low. It's very calming. There may be a scent in the room. There may not. Just depends on, like, who you're working with. But they're going to talk to you about a memory or whatever is happening with you. And the lady on this podcast talked about, people can start talking about things they remember and say, but that doesn't bother me. And I can literally feel their bodies tense up underneath me as they're telling me the story. So they mentally have decided this doesn't bother me, but I can feel that their bodies are still holding on to it. And so that's why craniosacral therapy is so cool. It can be so important, because I can do trauma work with people, especially this happened a lot more with adults, because children are so movement and in that part of their brain anyway, that when I do work with them, we're typically moving and playing, and they're doing active things, so they're using their body in ways that help them physically process that trauma as well as, like, mentally process it. But as adults, like, if you came in to process trauma with me, we would sit here like this most of the time, and, like, we would talk about it, and maybe we would do some movements, we would do some EMDR, like, there's some stuff that we would do, but a lot of times, and for a lot of therapists, you're just talking through it and you're processing it mentally.
That has always, like, low-key bothered me about therapy, because I'm just sitting there and I'm like, I feel like I need to be moving around.
Yeah. And if you guys,
can we garden while we talk about this?
Yeah. For you and for anybody out there that is in therapy, if you're in therapy and you are talking about something and you feel like you need to move, do that. Let your therapist know. Like, process that feeling with
walk
them.
around, pace.
If you need to stand up and walk around and pace, like, don't just jump up and start walking around, because your therapist can be like,
what'd you say?
Yeah, but so, like, tell your therapist, I feel like I need to, like, maybe walk around a little bit.
Cool.
They should have no problem with you getting up and walking around. Cool. There are kids and teens that I've worked with, they don't want to play, but we do our entire therapy session outside on a walk.
Oh, that's cool.
Yeah, so we're moving throughout therapy, and we're doing stuff where we have a therapy session playing basketball, or, and so, but people don't do that with adults.
Yeah. You said something a second ago, MDR?
EMDR.
EMDR, what is that?
That is a type of therapy. It's really cool. If you have never heard of it, look it up. You can, like, it's very easy to find. But it stands for eye movement desensitization and reprocessing.
Okay.
So, I am EMDR trained. I haven't done the paperwork and all that to be, like, certified EMDR or whatever.
Yeah.
But I am trained and have gone through all the supervision and done all that stuff. And so it is, you can do it a couple of different ways. It is where we create bilateral stimulation for your brain, right? So we're trying to
get your brain working in two different ways.
We're stimulating both sides of your brain, right? So we know your brain is split into two. You got a right and a left side of your brain. So in REM sleep, what we know about when you go into REM sleep is there's this bilateral work that your brain is doing. So both sides of your brain are working and processing and like storing things away. And in your sleep, when you go into that REM cycle, your eyes move, right?
Okay.
So what we're doing while you're fully conscious, this is not hypnosis, we create bilateral stimulation by either doing back and forth eye movements, and so you would follow my fingers back and forth. We can do tapping, a rhythmic tapping on your legs, or you could do it yourself. There's light that people use sometimes, but it's something that creates this bilateral like stimulation for your body.
It's just the science of making both sides of your brain work while you're doing
fully conscious, right? If you ever talk to anybody who has had EMDR therapy done, they will tell you it is weird. It is weird. In being trained for it, I had to do it. I had to have it done, I guess, to me or participate in it. That's how we practice doing it. We paired up with somebody in this like week-long training, and we picked like a topic that we wanted to process, and we processed it with this person using EMDR.
That's awesome.
It is really, really cool, but it feels really weird. It's almost like your brain literally splits in two and like it's talking to each other and like you're processing things internally. So I'm sitting here, we say like, Sarah, let's talk about this snake incident. And like we talk about it just a little bit.
That'll be all.
We talk about it just a little bit, just enough to like bring it up for you, right? And then I say, okay, follow my fingers, and we don't follow my fingers. Right
I'm not going
to.
to.
I'm not doing EMDR right now.
Yeah, not doing. Don't follow her fingers.
I do this back and forth. You follow my fingers, you track. You don't say anything, right? You just track and you think about this incident. And while that's going on, you are in your head like processing what happened, right? And your brain's talking, and we do that for like a short stint. And then I say, okay, take a deep breath, and then I like, on a scale of like 1 to 10, where are you? You tell me, and either we do another like session, or you say like, oh my God, this thing came up, you know, and say, okay, cool, and then I'll say, go with that, and then we'll do another thing. It's really crazy. It feels crazy.
It is super weird.
But it is a really, really
I have another
effective
question about something that you said. You talked about the neonatal baby holding massage,
craniosacral therapy.
Yep. So
nothing to do with neonatal babies.
Nope. Craniosacral therapy. No one's touching these children.
What do you mean?
You said
this is for adults.
Okay. Yeah. Cool. But in play therapy, you talked about
the kids are moving. Yeah, I'm not touching them. My kids.
Oh, okay. Yeah. That was a little bit confusing.
I mean, sometimes they'll ask for a hug, or like, I mean, they may touch me or may whatever. Like, it's not like, don't touch me.
They're kids. The first thing they do, they're like, "Oh, Miss Katie, I love you."
Yeah, or whatever. No, but no, I don't have children in my play therapy office that I'm like holding my hands over while they talk about things.
Yeah, I didn't think so, but for a second I was like, wait a second, I just want to clarify this. And then I have one last thing that I want to talk to. We were talking about prolonged stress and it messing with your lizard brain, which is your comfort space and all of that stuff. And I have just been, took a road trip and it was a long time in the car and we're in this. So, so I've started to get these tension headaches.
That's not why you have the tension headaches.
Oh, okay. We'll talk about that later then.
Yeah, no, the snake is why you have the tension headaches. The snake happened, by the way, like a week and a half ago. Like, it's very, very recent.
I'm so upset that that's why I have these tension headaches.
I thought we talked about this before, and I said it's because of the stress from the snake incident. Because that was the day it started. Think about it.
I'm very upset about this.
So sorry. Yeah, so that's why that.
I just thought I had a tension headache because it was like, I'm tired of being stressed out about just the general.
I mean, you were probably, when the snake thing happened, like, your stress level is up anyway, because I think all of our stress level is up right now because of the COVID, the global pandemic, and all the things happening. And, like, is it real? Is it not real? The government's going to kill us all. I don't know. Like, because
everybody,
it's that extreme, right?
Chatter everywhere.
Yeah, like
so I was like, I just chalked it up to just constant chatter.
And in the midst of all of that, you had a run-in with
the thing that I'm afraid of.
A phobia. Yeah.
Oh man.
And so, like,
unfettered access to therapist. These are the ways that I am out of my life.
Yeah. So, like,
Cool.
so if you, but I think we can globalize that to other people.
But I also
that
refuse to be like, no, that's that one thing that happened for 5 seconds that one day, and now I'm not going to deal with it again, and I'm completely okay.
Your body remembers.
And I got them. I hate that I made your point on purpose like that. I just,
but your
crazy.
body. But like I said, I think we can globalize that to other people, that we are all a little more heightened and stressed. And so, if in the midst of this you then experience a traumatic thing, it is more likely
that it will be
to
like
cause an impact, right? Because if that had happened, like you've run into things before,
mm-hmm.
and it was stressful, and you cried, and like you had the crazy response, and like your brain turned off, and all that same stuff happened. But then we walked away from it,
and it was like fine,
and we're okay. Like,
yeah,
maybe you're kind of laughing about it. This time, you were already like a little hyper aroused, and then you ran into the thing, and so it was just enough to push you over the edge.
All right, well, that's enough about that. Did you want to say anything else about stress and how our bodies respond to it?
Sorry to have a therapy session on your podcast.
Oh, we're not doing that.
So, but like I said, if you are, because I think the world's stress level is just heightened right now, if there are things that are, if you experience a traumatic thing or something that typically in the past you've just shaken off and you just can't shake it off, that's probably why you were already hyper aroused. You were already kind of waiting for a bad thing to happen. And so being able to either reach out to a therapist, because every therapist that I know right now is doing at least telehealth, and they would be glad to talk to you. If you don't know of a therapist, I know I said I work with kids, but one of the things that is really important to me is being aware of who's in my community and what they really specialize in. And so if you want to reach out to me, you can either do that through my website, my Instagram, you can call or text me. I will help connect you as an adult with a therapist.
If you don't know how to get in touch with Katie, you can...
We'll get Micah to we'll get Micah to
and I'll send you to her. Yeah, we'll just all that stuff.
So that I'm easily findable. Play Therapy with Sumter is my thing. So if
the Sassy Southern Life is our other Instagram, but we'll link it all up so you guys know. Go ahead.
Yeah, so if you just can't shake it off and you feel like, typically I would have like rolled with this and it would have been fine. It is totally okay that you can't shake this off. It is not your fault. It's not because you're suddenly weak or incapable or not good enough. It is because we are all stressed out anyway, and it's okay to not be okay, and it's okay to ask somebody to like help you to be okay again.
I agree with all that. That's exactly what I was thinking just now. It's like there's this stigma around therapy about like, oh, you gotta be crazy to go to therapy. No,
you really don't.
You're just dealing with a thing.
Yeah, and I think people our age are much more like, I mean, all of my friends are like, let me tell you what my therapist said. Like, and I find it really entertaining because I am a therapist, and so when people talk about a therapist, I'm always really entertained. I love that. You know, older generations have a little bit more trouble with that.
Yeah,
the boomers do.
But just because it was like,
because I really truly believe it's okay to not be okay.
Yeah. Just the stigma around, and it's not. You just, something happened, you gotta talk to somebody. What better opportunity to talk to somebody that's like not living in your everyday.
Yeah.
You're just like, I'm gonna tell you about this. You hold on to it, and I'm gonna go back to work.
It's not because Jesus isn't good enough. It's not because your faith isn't good enough. It's not because you haven't been faithful enough. It's not because you haven't prayed enough. Like, yeah,
it's gonna be okay. Sometimes we just need a little help. We carry those burdens together.
We should all be on a podcast together, because if I tear up, then you tear up, and it becomes a thing.
It's gonna be okay, guys. We're gonna make it.
We are fine, and it's not because you're not good enough.
So you're right. Anyway, also talk about the snake. I hate the snake. So anyways, yeah, I think we're good on time. We're good? All right, cool.
I was like, this is the shortest podcast you've ever done.
No, I think we got some time in this. Thanks for joining me and my sister Katie. Join us next time where we're not going to do therapy live in real time. But we will talk about it.
I love you guys so much. We're so glad you're a part of our community.
Yes, gosh. We moved a friend to Tennessee this weekend, and it just, I already love Sumter,
But it really drove home how much we love you guys.
Gosh,
and what a great community we have.
I love being in this community. Mm-hmm. There's such nice people here, and we're all like, hey, you want to get a taco? Hey, I'm going to beep at you on my golf cart.
And such high-quality people with such high-quality talents.
And they just love everybody. All right, we're going to end it.
Okay.
F45 sponsored this. Work out with them. They're online. And we love you guys. Thanks for listening to me and Katie talk about therapy.
Yeah.
See ya.
Bye.